Hey Kaiju fans, it's Titanolante, presenting Wikizilla's Kaiju profile on the most destructive weapon on Earth, Godzilla. The 2004 iteration of the King of Monsters starred in Godzilla Final Wars, the character's semi-centennial send-off film which preceded the longest ever gap between the release of two Japanese Godzilla movies. Emerging in response to humanity's destruction of Earth's environment, the film's opening narration states that Godzilla was the greatest enemy mankind ever faced. As explained to the character Kenta Taguchi by his grandpa while they in Manila were witness to the Big G's spontaneous leveling of a Japanese town, Godzilla's anger towards humans harkens back to long ago, when men made a huge fire and burned everything on the land.
That's why Godzilla cannot forgive mankind.
Upon his release from Area G, he's lured across the globe by the Gotengo, defeating the invading Zillion's army of mind-controlled monsters along the way. Following the final battle against Kaiser Ghidorah, Godzilla shoots down the Gotengo and menacingly stares down its crew, only to be convinced to stand down by his son Manila, in what, according to the director, is the first ever portrayal of him forgiving humanity. Handily the biggest of the Millennium Series Godzillas, as Final Wars returned to the Versus Series 100-meter scale, he's often contended to be among the most powerful incarnations of the King of the Monsters. Known also as Final Godzilla, Final Goji, or even FW Goji for short, Bandai figures contemporary to his movie were marketed with the name Godzilla 2005. Keeping with the convention of labeling newly introduced incarnations with the upcoming year done throughout the Heisei and Millennium eras. For Godzilla's 50th anniversary film, director Ryuhei Kitamura sought to emphasize monster battles, aiming to portray a more powerful Godzilla and harken back to the Toho Champion Festival-era films from his childhood. Camera tests were conducted using an SOS Goji suit from the previous year's Godzilla Tokyo SOS, but Kitamura and monster modeler Shinichi Wakasa concluded that its movements were not suitable. Wakasa recalled the Godzilla fighting game his child had played and showed it to Kitamura, who agreed that it was closer to what he was looking for. Yasushini Arasawa submitted striking concept art of a jagged Godzilla, sporting curved spiky fins and a conspicuous red chest. Yoji Shinkawa additionally sketched an extremely thin Goji, with almost skeletal hands and a skull-like face flicking its tongue. However, neither of their designs were selected. Instead, Wakasa designed the new Godzilla himself, with input from Kitamura and special effects director Eiichi Asada. In designing Godzilla's head, Wakasa thought it appropriate to combine characteristics of several prior looks for the character's 50th anniversary, namely the Shodai Goji, Mosu Goji, and Heisei Godzilla designs. Godzilla's muscles and facial expressions were emphasized to align with Kitamura's vision. His dorsal fins were also made smaller so as not to interfere with the choreography, and the whites of his eyes were removed so that he would not seem willful. 3 Final Goji costumes were made by Wakasa and his company Monsters Inc. The main suit for close-ups, another for action, and one for super action. Wakasa created the head sculpt. The upper body was sculpted by Akira Yamada, and the dorsal fins were shaped out of polyethylene foam. Molds were then created from these parts, with the head and torso cast in latex and the fins in urethane. Conversely, the suit's body parts from the waist down were fabricated from scratch by gluing together pieces of urethane. Though the materials used were no different than on previous suits, the modeling team took steps to make them more lightweight and easy to act in. For one, the space inside was not filled with latex, ensuring that stuntman Tsutomu Kitagawa's movements wouldn't be restricted. The suit's arms were the only parts which fit snugly, and they had a dual joint at the armpit to increase their range of motion. Also different from the previous costumes was a lack of internal lighting in Godzilla's dorsal fins, both to reduce weight and to accommodate the reduction in size. The only lighting installed in any of the suits were in their mouths, for atomic breath. The head of each suit was attached to a helmet-like skull cap worn by Kitagawa, allowing his neck movements to translate to Godzilla's. The close-up suit also possessed a radio-controlled jaw. In recent years, the Final Goji suits have been repurposed for Godzilla Fest short films, specifically 2021's Godzilla vs. Hedorah and last year's Fest Godzilla 3, Gigan Attacks. And just like the original movies these shorts celebrate, the Godzilla suit is visibly deteriorating. That's some faithful attention to detail. Okay, to be fair, it's been 2 decades since Final Wars, so shikatanai. Godzilla was awakened by nuclear testing in 1954 and subsequently declared war on humanity. The international military org known as the Earth Defense Force, an M organization, its special unit of mutant human recruits, were formed to combat Godzilla and the numerous other kaiju that appeared over the years, but could never defeat him. 20 years ago, he was led to the South Pole for a final confrontation. There he encountered the flying battleship Gotengo, which he promptly grounded. Before he could finish it off, an earthquake opened a fissure in the ground beneath him. Young crew member Douglas Gordon fired at a nearby mountain, burying the king of the monsters inside the crevice in the resulting avalanche. Area G was constructed around the icy tomb, and there he lay for decades to come. In the year 2000 XX, an alien force known as the Zillions invaded Earth and took control of all the planet's monsters, using them to destroy major cities around the globe. The Gotengo, piloted by now Captain Gordon and staffed with the EDF's remaining forces, flew to Area G to release the Big G, believing him the only force capable of defeating the Zillions' monster army. They were intercepted by the Zillions' cyborg monster Gigan, but launched a volley of missiles on the way down, targeting and successfully hitting Area G. As Gigan landed next to the fallen ship, a familiar heat ray met him. Godzilla had awakened. Gigan countered shortly thereafter, subsequently enveloping Godzilla with his hooking anchors and attempting to drag him towards his bladed cutter. Godzilla, however, simply blasted the space monster's head off with atomic breath. With that taken care of, Godzilla switched his focus onto the ship that had entombed him, chasing it to Sydney, Australia. There, Godzilla found himself attacked by the monster Zilla, who he quickly finished off. Next, Godzilla fought Kumonga in New Guinea. Godzilla grabbed a thread of Kumonga's web and tossed the giant spider over the horizon before going on his way. After reaching the Kanto region of Japan, the aliens deployed Kamacuras. Goji fired his atomic breath to flush out the camouflaged mantis, who then flew at him. Godzilla simply grabbed Kamacuras and hurled it at an electrical tower, impaling and killing it. Further inland, he reached Mount Fuji, where the Zillions deployed Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar against him. More than a match for the trio, he defeated them one after the other, leaving their unconscious bodies behind. Once in Tokyo Bay, Godzilla catapulted both Hedorah and Ebirah into the city with atomic blasts. With both monsters immobilized, Godzilla destroyed them. Finally, in the heart of Tokyo, Godzilla observed the aliens approaching Hail Mary, the asteroid Gorath. He planted his feet and fired a hyper-spiral heat ray at it, triggering its explosion in the skies over the city. When the dust settled above the newly formed crater, Monster X descended from the heavens. The two clashed, with this new Daikaiju proving right away to be a formidable opponent. Meanwhile, Mothra had just arrived in Tokyo to assist the King of the Monsters, but was intercepted by the freshly repaired modified Gigan, who quickly knocked her out of the sky. The two aliens promptly joined forces, and Monster X held Godzilla in place. He was struck by Gigan's bloody chainsaw, but moved out of the way in time for the next swing, which hit Monster X instead. Mothra flew in and knocked the two to the ground, forcing Gigan to give chase again. The ancient rivals took each other out of commission, leaving Godzilla and Monster X in a one-on-one where the Big G managed to gain the upper hand. Right after the crew of the Gotengo escaped from inside the Zillion mothership as it self-destructed, the monsters fired their beams at each other. The attacks locked in midair and produced a forceful explosion, knocking the two back to opposite sides of the city. Suddenly, Monster X transmogrified into Kaiser Ghidorah. The kaiju initiated a beam fight, but the beast's anti-gravity beams overpowered Goji's atomic breath. Kaiser Ghidorah then hurled its foe across the ruined city and continued to brutalize him until it finally gripped Godzilla in its maws and started siphoning his energy. Witnessing this, the crew of the Gotengo realized they needed to help. EDF M Organization mutant Shinichi Ozaki used the Gotengo's maser cannon to channel and transfer his newly unlocked reservoir of Kaiser energy into Godzilla, reinvigorating him. Kaiser Ghidorah was forced to let go of its enemy, who in turn immediately got back into the fight. Ghidorah countered with an anti-gravity beam, but Godzilla retaliated with a supercharged atomic breath which annihilated the monster's middle head. After his severing of the second head, Godzilla manhandled the maimed Kaiser Ghidorah, ultimately lobbing it in the air and firing a burning G-spark heat ray which pushed the dragon to the edge of outer space, where it exploded. Not having forgotten his battle with the Gotengo, Godzilla turned his attention toward the warship and blasted it with atomic breath. Upon crashing into the ruins of Tokyo, its passengers exited the ship and were faced down by the King of Monsters. Before Godzilla could finally annihilate them, Minilla arrived and convinced him to stand down. Godzilla turned and made his way out of the ruined city with his son, wading out into the ocean. The Final Wars Godzilla possesses remarkable physical prowess, facilitating rapid-fire dispatch of opponents when coupled with his lightning-fast reflexes. Among the most dexterous and agile versions of the Big G, he's proficient in close-quarters combat. Note his use of closed-fist punches, in contrast to the usual Godzilla slap, opportune grapples and impressive throws, most notably his overhand toss of Kaiser Ghidorah, whose mass is double his own, display of his formidable leg strength by way of well-executed jumping maneuvers and potent kicks, and his command over his tail through the precise deflection of high-speed opponents. Godzilla efficiently improvised battle strategies against his foes, promptly dispatching them one by one, at least till Monster X. Also, his capacity for communication is such that he understood Minilla standing in front of the humans as meaning that they're not a threat. A concentrated stream of radiation fired from his mouth, Godzilla's staple atomic breath is his most powerful weapon, and especially so in this movie. The attack sent flying the 70,000 metric ton Hedorah and 50,000 ton Ebirah thousands of meters into the air from out Tokyo Bay, and otherwise killed Godzilla's enemies after one sustained hit, with the noted exception of Monster X. Atomic breath seemed to match the power of his destroyed Thunder Beam, but got beat out in a lock by Kaiser Ghidorah's anti-gravity beams. Godzilla dished out a stronger variant, known as the Hyper-Spiral Heat Ray, to destroy the asteroid Gorath hundreds of miles above the Earth with supreme accuracy and precision. Once supercharged with Ozaki's Kaiser energy, his internal radiation forced Kaiser Ghidorah to release its restraints on him. He then blew off the beast's middle head with a point-blank atomic blast. Lastly, the burning G-Spark Heat Ray was a red spiral variant used to push Ghidorah into the edge of the planet's atmosphere before obliterating him. Boasting amazing durability, Godzilla comfortably withstood attacks from most foes. His remarkable stamina is exhibited through single-handedly stopping the asteroid Gorath after having traveled half the globe and defeating half a dozen kaiju over the span of a day. Godzilla only met the end of his rope against Monster X, whose physical strength and beam weapons matched or exceeded his own in power, had modified Gigan during the aliens' 2-on-1 against him. Kaiser Ghidorah repeated that domination all on his own, ensnaring Godzilla and draining him of his life force. The intervention of Mothra in the former fight, and Ozaki with the Gotengo in the latter, saved him. Aside from that, the movie's theater program lists low temperature as his weakness, which, well, fair enough, I suppose. By this point, it's common knowledge that Godzilla's been recipient to a couple of real-world awards and honors. The one you see bandied about on social media most often claims that Godzilla became an official citizen of Japan, which isn't exactly the case. Shinjuku Ward awarded the character a special certificate of residence with no legal effect, but I digress. He's one of a few fictional characters to have received an MTV Lifetime Achievement Award, along with Jason Voorhees and Chewbacca, and is one of 24 who've been dedicated a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He got his during the festivities around the world premiere of Godzilla Final Wars on November 29th in Los Angeles. Suit actor Tsutomu Kitagawa, in costume, along with several others from both behind and in front of the camera, were in attendance on the red carpet. Despite the silhouette callback in the intro Final Wars, the Godzilla in this movie is not the same individual as the Heisei series Godzilla Jr. Aside from nothing official ever stating this to be the case, the text of the film makes clear that this Godzilla appeared in 1954 and has continually been a threat to mankind. But what official materials have said is that Final Wars exists in its own continuity, separate from anything else. It's extremely rare to see licensed merchandise for concept or unmade versions of Toho Kaiju, even including the Big G himself. Mostly you'll see fan-made garage kits, sold at conventions such as Wonderfest. You might glimpse an official Godzilla Gold branding sticker on their boxes, which you'd think shouldn't be on these if they're fan-made? What's up with that? Well, the legal status of these kits is an interesting and kinda convoluted topic. The Wikipedia article for garage kits explains, it's not uncommon for a license holder to issue a single-day license where for one day only, license is granted for the sale of amateur garage kits in an effort to legitimize their production and sale in Japan. So, from the hands of Takashi Yamawaki of T's Facto, comes the Yasushi Nirasawa concept version Godzilla Resin Cast model kit. Released in 2018, it's even approved by Nirasawa's office. Good luck getting one though. Final Goji has scarcely been used in media in the almost 2 decades since he debuted. Tie-in comics and novels for Godzilla movies had dried up by now. In concept sketches for a pitched follow-up to the IDW comic Godzilla Gangsters and Goliaths, titled Lolitas and Leviathans, artist Matt Frank even brought up that this Godzilla hasn't been used much. We can only speculate as to why, but we've at least seen him pop up recently. He's in the Ensemble mobile games Godzilla Kaiju Collection, Defense Force, and Battle Line, which everybody and their grandma's in those games, but it's better than nothing. And while artists used the final Goji design on a couple covers for IDW over the years, it wouldn't see proper use in a comic until 2022's Godzilla Rivals vs. Gigan, which appropriately enough took place in 2008. Perhaps we'll see more of him when early 2000s nostalgia really gets going. But yeah, that's it for the Final Wars Godzilla. Saraba, Gojira.